In the remote village of Grey Rock, nestled deep within the shrouded woods, there was an air of unease that never seemed to lift. It was said that for centuries an ancient curse haunted the land, a curse perpetuated by the presence of a vampire. The villagers rarely spoke of it, hushed whispers only exchanged in the darkest corners of the local tavern. But every few decades, when the moon was at its darkest, a shroud of terror would descend upon Grey Rock as the vampire stirred from its slumber. The legend spoke of a grand mansion located in the heart of the woods, where the vampire resided during its waking nights. It was said that the vampire mostly feasted on animals, hunters pointing out the dead deer carcasses they found in the woods, drained of blood and pierced with just 2 holes. But some say that if the vampire gets desperate enough, he lurks in the shadows of the village, grabbing a lonesome drunk leaving the pub at night. Tonight we are diving into the shadowy and captivating world of vampires. These mythical creatures have enthralled our imaginations for centuries, inspiring countless tales of darkness and immortality. My name is Kayla, this is Xenu, and we are Cauldron Convos, baby!
And I want to suck your blood.
And I'm supposed to be a vampire, but I don't got the teeth.
I'm a bat.
Do the bat wing. Did you already do it? Woohoo! I love that. That's so funny. They should make more clothing like with bat wings.
They really should.
Like that just makes it.
Just walking around the studio though, it's like really
like
a hindrance.
Or sleeves like this, like
I was trying to heat up the smoke machine, and it just like was getting in the way.
Or these things. Bring these things back. What are these things called? The little collar things. Sorry, I put a little mini cauldron. Oh.
Well, that's why the bat
goes.
wings. Yeah, bat wings are a hazard.
That's why bat wings are not part of fashion.
I'm gonna sue you.
What is this collar thing called?
A ruffle?
Yeah, but like I feel like this was in ancient times for some reason.
Oh,
was it their version of a tie? A puppy cuff.
I made that up.
Oh. It sounded so right. I was
know.
like, oh my God. I feel like there was a song about it.
It's on the tip of my tongue. We'd like to thank this week's sponsor, HalloweenCostumes.com.
Thank you, HalloweenCostumes.com. Thank you for the Mothman costume. If you are new here, make sure to subscribe because you don't want to miss next week's costume and you don't want to miss next week's topic because we're doing a little chilling topics. I can't speak English.
We have like 3 more weeks of costumes.
Halloween. Yeah. So buckle up and get ready, baby. Get ready to be scared.
They really hooked us
primal
up.
Fear. They did hook us up. Thank you again, HalloweenCostumes.com. And you can use the code and the link in the description to get 15% off your Halloween costumes. Don't wait. Don't be that person that waits until like the day before a Halloween party and you're on Pinterest trying to do a DIY costume. Don't be that person.
Don't be that girl.
Be prepared, okay? And be prepared and do it now.
Honestly, these are probably the first Halloween costumes I've purchased or I've like worn in not ever, but in a very, very long time.
But I haven't bought a Halloween costume in like a minute.
At least 15 years.
Yeah, and if I were to buy a Halloween costume, it would be last minute and it would be like the slim pickings of them. It would not be like my choice. But this time, we got all the good choices, and you can too.
You know, if you're broke and you just have a sheet, throw a sheet over it. And
yeah, that's true.
And that's just classic.
And when I was a kid, I never got to pick my Halloween costume. Like, you know, like the magazines that would come from like Party City or HalloweenCostumes.com. I don't know if they send them, but do people send those anymore? I feel like no, because of the internet. Anyway, bring those back, but whatever. I never got to pick because my mom always wanted to DIY it. But you know what? At least she was trying. Okay? You know what I mean?
I suppose so. But
mine were more creative than the candy corn girl. Yeah, that's true. I mean, I never had a vampire costume.
Imagine giving someone a hug in this. It would be just all encompassing.
That would be very cozy, I feel like. Let's get into this week's episode on vampires. We'll be talking about the ancient origins of vampires because, as you know, if you're a returning subscriber, there's so many paranormal phenomenon that roots into ancient origins, which makes it a little more believable, I think, at least. Like that it dates back so long ago, and we'll see vampires across different cultures as well, which also makes me think, what the hell? If everyone on this planet is experiencing these same things or hears the same stories, then maybe there's some truth to it.
Different continents, different religions. There's all sorts of implications on vampires.
Mm-hmm. And we'll be talking about the belief of vampires and how that relates to plagues and other illnesses, I guess, throughout history, which is kind of interesting. And even people buried alive.
And maybe we'll even talk about...
my biggest fear.
Being buried alive.
Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe we'll even talk about, some of the naughtier sides of vampires.
Whoa! I didn't want to tell anyone my biggest fear. No, I shouldn't. My biggest fear is to be given $1 million. Don't do it, guys.
My biggest fear is to order us all of the Legos on the Amazon wish list.
I thought you were going to say Domino's. I was like,
oh.
The lava cakes.
Our P.O. box. If you send us a Domino's gift card to our P.O. box,
I'll send you a hat. So we're also going to be talking about ways to ward off vampires. I know you probably know the typical one, but we're going to go even further into it just in case you see someone in class and you're like, or whatever at work, and you're like, this motherfucker is a vampire.
One of the first things Kayla said to me when she met me was, "Are you a vampire?"
You know what? You got to ask the hard-hitting questions. Anyway, but if there's something that specifically interests you that we just said, you can always go to the chapters below because we break it down for you. We don't want to waste your time, okay? We want to give it to you good. Ew.
If you guys want us to cover a specific topic, please join our Discord.
So we see the concepts of vampires first emerging in the ancient civilizations. And while these ancient tales and beliefs don't align exactly with the more modern portrayal of a vampire, like the Edward Cullen aesthetic of a vampire, and the beliefs don't exactly align with, the traditional
An angsty teen.
Yeah.
An angsty horn dog.
But there are definitely some themes to highlight, some similarities that make it seem that vampires have been around. Stories, legends have been around of vampires for centuries. For example, in Mesopotamia, we see the tale of Lilitu. And Lilitu is a female figure who seduced men and feasted on their blood. So I feel like anything that feasts on blood of like...
You need to really pronunciate feast.
Did I feast?
It really sounds like feces.
I thought you were going to say feet. I was like, feet on feast. I don't know what I'm saying.
Feast on feet?
Yeah, but anyway, this woman named Lilitu was often depicted as a night-haunting figure who sought to drain men of their vitality and life. Oh my god, I have an aunt that's like that. Just kidding. And their money. Ah! Okay. Cue the family group chat going off. Okay, anyway. Another similar figure was Lamashtu, a demoness who is believed to steal infants and suck their blood, also known as Nancy Pelosi. You were not expecting that. I love saying, little things. It sounds like I'm in the voice of, just reading off some notes, and then you're just bewildered. Okay, so Lilitu, also spelled Lilith, is also said to be mentioned in Jewish mythology as well. Similarly, in Greek and Roman folklore, the Lamia and Empusa were female spirits known for their seductive and bloodthirsty tendencies. And the Empusa was actually a shapeshifter as well, and I wanted to call that out because we just covered shapeshifting in a previous podcast episode. If you are interested in hearing about that, click up here. I'll put a little white bubble thingy and you can watch that later or whatever you want. Shapeshifting is kind of crazy and cool, but we didn't talk about Empusa there, but we talked about a lot of other iconic shapeshifters, okay? But also, what is up with these seductive women feasting on men in their life?
That are shapeshifters. Sounds like
common?
It's just a representation of women, or an interpretation of women.
I guess so. Well,
welcome to ancient feminism.
Yes, exactly. But in Chinese folklore as well, there's the concept of the jiangshi, or also called the hopping vampire. And these undead creatures are said to rise from their graves, often due to improper burials or unfinished business. So they're like, oh, I forgot to punch that mother effer in the face. Let me get up. He wronged someone in my family and I didn't do anything and now I'm dead and I have to leave my grave. They have unfinished business. These jiangshis.
Well, that's like a vampire. They sleep in coffins. They leave their grave every night.
True.
No?
True. But when they would rise, they would hop around. I don't know if this means that they have their I don't know, what's the word for hopping around on a foot?
Peg-legged?
I don't want to say that, but yeah, like they're just like on a pogo stick. Like that's their, I'm just picturing like a vampire pogo stick thing. And they would hop around and they were believed to feed on the life force of the living. And in Indian folklore as well, the Vatala was a type of undead creature that could possess corpses and reanimate them. Ew. That's just like
what Voldemort does.
Oh yeah. No, I'm just thinking of like what's it called? Like a ventriloquist, but like a stuffed person. Like
Inferi.
A taxidermy ventriloquist.
They're called Inferi.
Oh, there's a word for it.
There's a rapper actually that got stuffed for his funeral, and he was like sitting in a chair pretending to be smoking something. I swear to God.
Oh my God.
Or maybe
that's wild.
I saw it on Facebook.
It was like fake. Similarly, the Bhuta was a restless spirit that could possess both living and dead bodies. The term upir in Slavic folklore referred to a type of vampire-like creature. These beings were believed to drink blood, but they also had other supernatural powers and could shapeshift. See, don't you love how like this shape-shifting theme is coming up? Like,
are you sure these aren't liberals? Shape-shifting blood drinkers. Alex
Reptiles,
Jones
Pogo.
Would be all over this.
I'm just kidding.
The liberals. They're trying to drink children's blood.
Where is that guy these days?
Yeah, bring back Alex Jones.
No, I don't know. Well, bring him back and make him go to Bohemian Grove and get like the inside scoop, and then he could go back and crawl in his hole. Anyway, these upir, the vampire-like creatures in the Slavic folklore, were actually often associated with diseases and plagues, and we'll see this as a theme later on, like medieval Europe times. And vampires are always having to deal with like sickness, which is kind of interesting because they're always like pale in the modern.
They just look sickly.
Yeah, and like blue and shiny,
greasy
like, why
hair.
are you shiny? What's going on with your eyeballs too? Anyway, in Slavic and Chinese traditions, any corpse that was jumped over by an animal, particularly a dog or a cat, was feared to become one of the undead. I don't know, Gertrude down the road, if she's like about to die and she's like 10 cats, game over. That bitch is turning to a vampire. Bury that bitch. Like, those cats going to be hopping up and down all around the bodies, and no one's going to find her till like a week later when they hear the cats like, you know?
Yeah.
By that time, you're too late. You're done. Your blood is drained. I don't know where I'm going with this. Anyway, a body with a wound that had not been treated with boiling water was also at risk. In Russian folklore, vampires were said to have been once witches or people who had rebelled against the Russian Orthodox Church while they were alive. Sounds like a kind of like Salem witch trial-esque thing.
Yeah.
That it's like, you're a vampire if you're not practicing the religion. You're a witch if you're, if you don't go to church and this and that, whatever.
Sounds like the Christians are at it again.
And because of all of these beliefs, cultural practices often arose that were intended to prevent a recently deceased loved one from turning into a vampire. The last thing you want is Aunt Gertrude to become one of them, because it's your loved one. And you don't want to get bit by them. And burying a corpse upside down was also widespread, as was placing earthly objects such as scythes or sickles. I don't know if I said that right. Scythes. Scythes. Or sickles near the grave to satisfy any demons entering the body or to appease the dead so that it would not wish to arise from its coffin. So it's like, oh, is a sickle money? Or no, a sickle's like a thing in their head, right? Like a metal.
Think about like the Soviet flag.
Yeah, like a metal thing.
No, a sickle is used to harvest wheat.
Yeah, they stick it in their head though.
Yes.
So but why that would satisfy the demon?
No, I think it's to prevent them from waking up.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Well, this method also resembles the ancient Greek practice of placing an obelisk in the corpse's mouth to pay the toll to cross the river Styx in the underworld. Like, no, if you're dead, like, don't stick anything in my mouth, please. Like, let me just rot in the woods on a nice leather sofa and disintegrate. Sorry, that's kind of how I want to go. Do not put in, what the hell is an obelisk?
Obelisk?
I think it's like a ball, gag ball.
No,
like they're just going to
obelisk?
stick, obelisk sounds like something round.
Is it obelisk?
No, obelisk. It's a coin. So you're going to stick a round ancient Greek coin in my mouth, you weirdo.
An ancient Greek gag ball.
What am I, a freaking candy ball, gumball machine that you could just put something in and think something's going to come out of me?
I knew this was going to get kinky.
The gag ball. Anyway. Oh, here, see, if I read the next sentence, then I would have known that it was a coin. The coin may have also been intended to ward off any evil spirits from entering the body, and this may have influenced later vampire folklore. There were other methods in Europe. Obviously, Europe has all these crazy methods, including severing the tendons at the knees or placing poppy seeds, millet, or sand on the ground at the grave site of a presumed vampire. I feel like I've seen that, like sand. Like, you don't want, like, water to get in there or something. I don't know why sand would be... I don't know.
Sand's like a trap.
Yeah.
I don't like sand. Imagine a
pocket sand.
Like, imagine a pocket sand. I love King of the Hill. Imagine, like, you know, you're getting up from your sleep, you're a vampire, and you get sand in your shoes.
Or in your eyes.
Ooh.
Can't see.
Or sand in your shoes is going to slow you down. That would probably fuck me up more than my eyes.
Or your... undies.
Nothing is worse than sand in the stop being so, get your mind out of the gutter. Sand in the weave of your socks.
Okay.
So it's just like a little sandpaper.
I feel like this is not a relatable. Everyone wears flip-flops to the beach, okay?
I wear Crocs.
Oh, do you wear socks with them?
Croc gang.
You are wearing socks. Interesting.
I'm wearing socks with Crocs.
The sand on the ground of the gravesite of a presumed vampire. This was intended to keep the vampire occupied all night. So it wasn't because they wanted to use it for their eyes or to get in their socks or their crotch. This was because they thought that this would occupy them all night by counting the fallen grains. So the vampires would just be so stupid that they would be like, let me count.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Count Dracula. Maybe that's why it's called Count.
Whoa.
Conspiracy, Sesame Street.
1, 2, 3, 4.
What's arithmomania? Is that like having a thing where you just count things? Oh my god, that's definitely why they count. Arithmomania is a mental disorder that may be seen as an expression of obsessive compulsive disorder. They need to count their actions or objects. So there's a belief that vampires have this thing they have to count, and that's why it's called Count Dracula, and that's why in Sesame Street he's like 1, 2, fuck this.
No, that's like an old one. Shout out to Sesame Street for the deep cut.
Yeah, what the hell? Like Paranormal Icon. There's probably so many other little roots in there.
I love that.
We go back and they're wearing gag balls and like trying to get out of a grave. We're like, the Cookie Monster.
The Cookie Monster.
So similar Chinese narratives state that if a vampiric being came across a sack of rice, it would have to count every grain. So this seems to be a theme encountered in different cultures, also from the Indian subcontinent, as well as in South American tales of witches and other sorts of evil or mischievous spirits or beings, having them like, you know, have a thing where they have to count. So obviously we see the vampires in all these different legends and tales, different cultures. But now we're going to talk about how they actually identified a vampire besides them having this thing where they have to just count sand, I guess, or the gag balls. Now, many interesting rituals were used to identify a vampire. One method of finding a vampire's grave involved leading a virgin boy through a graveyard or church grounds on a virgin stallion.
This sounds like something the church came up with.
It does. They're like, you have to go, you lead it through the grave to the priest's house.
You have to take the virgin boy to the priest's house in the middle of the night.
And that is how you tell if a vampire is watching over your family. But anyway, the horse would supposedly balk. What's balk?
Buck.
It says B-A-L-K. It doesn't say buck.
Balk? Like in baseball? Like a balk?
Like a chicken? The horse is just like... Okay. But they would do whatever that means at the grave in question, and generally a black horse was required, though in Albania they specified that it should be white. So there's like these different little random things in each one.
Interesting.
So
I
no
feel
one really
like
knows what to
vampires
do here.
in Albania are pretty popular. Like there's a lot of vampires there.
Just
Albania,
Eastern Europe in general, I feel like
if it ends in Ania, Romania,
Albania,
Transylvania,
Armenia.
No.
Okay, Tasmania?
No, that's Australia.
Okay, anyway. Well, maybe they had some vampires there. So, holes appearing in the earth over a grave were taken as a sign of the vampires being buried there. Corpses thought to be vampires were generally described as having a healthier appearance than expected. They tended to be plump and showing little or no signs of decomposition. In some cases, when suspected graves were opened, villagers often described the corpse as having fresh blood from a victim all over its face. So they would, dig up this body and they would see blood all over it. And it's like, what? Why would there be blood over it? And evidence that a vampire was active in a given locality included death of cattle, sheep, relatives, or neighbors. And folkloric vampires could also make their presence felt by engaging in minor poltergeist-styled activity, such as hurling stones on roofs or moving household objects and pressing on people in their sleep. So kind of like a ghost, I guess, demon, that kind of thing. They were associated with doing similar things where it's like you can't see them, but you know something's there. Apotropaics are items able to ward off revenants, and you probably...
Apotropics, I think.
Apotropics are items able to ward off revenants, and you probably know these are common in vampiric folklore. You probably know about the garlic hanging at their door. I feel like that's something that I knew when I was 7, and I was like...
One of our neighbors, like down the street and around the block, she has garlic on her door.
Wait, here?
Here.
Yeah, they still do?
I mean, I haven't looked recently.
I feel like it was gone. Like, I feel like I have a core memory of that, and then, whenever I look at it now, it's not there.
Oh.
So maybe it, only appears... maybe it only is around Halloween.
Some elephant garlic from Whole Foods?
Yeah. Those are big ones. Those are big boys.
Suck on one.
You could put that as the gag ball on the corpse.
It's so interesting how garlic just, remains in your mouth. Like, I ate something garlic today, and I will taste it until tomorrow, no matter how many times I brush my teeth.
Yeah, it's kind of trippy. But anyway... Garlic is a common example of this, like we said, but in addition to garlic, a branch of wild rose and hawthorn are sometimes associated with causing harm to vampires. In Europe, mustard seeds would be sprinkled on the roof of a house to keep them away. Others include sacred items such as crucifixes, rosary, holy water. Some folklore also states that vampires are unable to walk on consecrated ground, such as that of churches or temples, or cross running water. That's another theory. Although not traditionally regarded as something to ward off vampires, mirrors have been used to ward off vampires when placed facing outwards on a door. In some cultures, vampires do not have a reflection and sometimes do not cast a shadow, perhaps as a manifestation of the vampire's lack of a soul. And some traditions also hold that a vampire cannot enter a house unless it's invited by the owner. But after the owner invites the vampire in, the vampire then can come and go as they please.
It's like black-eyed children.
Mm-hmm. Which we wanted to quickly call out hats that we're selling.
It's right
only
there.
Only for $15.
They're the first production run of our hats.
They say don't open the door, and they feature little black-eyed children, and they're embroidered, and they're dark green just in time for autumn, spooky season,
they're
all
cool.
the good things. And we'll be putting that link, the Etsy link, in the description. Again, they're only $15. Though these folkloric vampires were said to be more active at night, they were actually not the type of vampires that couldn't go in the sun. That was kind of a more modern take on vampires. Reports in 1693 and 1694 concerning sightings of vampires in Poland and Russia claim that when a vampire's grave was recognized, eating bread baked with its blood mixed into the flour or simply drinking it granted the possibility of protection.
Those Polish
now, who's
people...
a bloodsucker now, weirdos? There's some more of these attempts to ward off vampires through different cultures, different time periods, but I think you get the point. They're all interesting, kind of crazy, bizarre, whatever. But they have some similarities through cultures, which is, again, weird. Like, where did they get this from? Kind of odd. Now, as far back as the 11th century, there was this myth in Eastern Europe, mostly that some people who died would claw their way out of the grave and become blood-sucking monsters that were vampires. But this myth actually got really popular in the 17th and the 18th century, which brings us to our next kind of segment on vampires and like a highlighted time period for the vampires and the legends. And we can even see evidence of anti-vampire rituals, such as metal rod hammered through a body's skeleton to make sure that they didn't become vampires. And recently, researchers actually did a biogeochemical analysis of bones found in vampire graves from a cemetery in northwestern Poland. And they found 6 skeletons that had sickles placed around their neck or body, or large rocks stacked under their chins.
Now, have you seen what that looks like? It's like a necklace of a sickle.
Ooh.
So if you stand up, it cuts your head off.
Ooh. Ooh.
It goes like this, like in the grave.
Dang, okay. During the 17th and 18th centuries epidemics, such as the bubonic plague, it led to mass graves and a lack of understanding of decomposition of bodies, which fostered the vampire beliefs even more. So rather than using a scientific explanation of, epidemics and the spread of disease, obviously because they didn't have the technology. Most people thought these things would have been caused by supernatural entities like vampires, so they thought that these plagues were not spread by them pooping in buckets and throwing out the window. They were like, nuh-uh. That's a corpse coming back from the dead and making us sick or whatever. And there were some beliefs, for example, that corpses that were bloated from decomposition were thought actually undead and to blame for spreading disease. People would sometimes suspect someone a vampire when the dead body did not look as they thought a normal corpse should. But these people didn't know that the rates of decomposition vary depending on the type of soil that the body was buried in, the temperature even of the soil. That would affect the decomposition
Imagine
rates.
They were just like frozen and they're like,
Yeah.
oh God, this guy hasn't decomposed a sec.
Yeah, it's like middle of winter and it's like, wait, why isn't this body decomposing as much as the ones in the summer? Like, okay.
They're
But whatever,
vampires.
they didn't know. Yeah, they're vampires. In 1645, the Greek librarian of the Vatican made a description of the Balkan beliefs in vampires. The Eastern European tales of vampires also went on to Germany and England, causing tales of vampires there as well. So now it's spreading from Eastern Europe to Western Europe. And in Croatia in 1672, there was actually a panic among villagers because they thought this man had become a vampire after dying, drinking blood from victims, and sexually harassing his widow. The panic actually led the village leader to order a stake to be driven through his heart. And then later his corpse was also beheaded.
Oh,
just to really get him, just to really make sure that everything's
Why
solved.
did they mess around with dead bodies so much back in the day?
Yeah, I don't know.
Because there's nothing else to do. There's no TikTok.
There's no TikTok. There's
no Instagram.
And like putting a sickle in
Follow us on
body.
Instagram, the Almighty Xenu.
And Kayla Cauldron. Sightings of vampires were reported in journals and gazettes in Poland and Russia in the 1690s. The vampires were supposed to have sucked the blood of humans and animals, and engorged, blood would flow from their eyeballs, pores, and other orifices. Their bums. And once dug up, their coffins were said to have been swimming in gore. But what people back then didn't know was that corpses swell as gases from decomposition accumulate in the torso, and the increased pressure forces blood to ooze from the nose, the mouth, other areas. And there was also this thing that gases could actually make this noise, like this type of noise bubbling in a body, even if it's buried. And they thought that some people heard like noises coming from grave
Some king
sites.
exploded.
Really?
Google it. King exploded.
Not the King of England right now, right? What's his name? Henry? No. Edward? No. William? No. What's the guy's name?
Charles,
whatever, same shit. Anyway, additionally, other things people would claim are signs of a vampire are that the hair, nails, and teeth grow despite the corpse being dead, which at first you would be like, ew, what? Like long nails on they're just growing out like little...
Like Cardi B nails?
Cardi B nails, yeah, like the acrylics.
How does a vampire wipe its ass?
They wrap the toilet paper, and that's how mummies became. Anyway... That's what Trisha Paytas does. She wraps her whole hand. But after death, the skin and gums lose fluids and contract, exposing the roots of the hair, the nails, and the teeth, so that even teeth that were concealed in the jaw. Oh, wait, what?
Ew.
So this can produce the illusion that the hair, nails, and teeth have actually grown. At a certain stage, the nails fall off, and the skin peels away, resulting in the dermis and nail beds emerging underneath, which were interpreted as new skin and new nails, which is why they had this belief that they were growing some acrylics, baby. Now we're going to get into the 18th century. And the 18th century actually marked a turning point with the vampire hysteria in Eastern Europe, so much so that physicians were investigating the reports of these undead monsters or the vampires who drank blood. So physicians in the 1730s recorded the physical symptoms of vampire attacks, from shivering and nausea to spasms, nightmares, and death. And this hysteria led to digging up bodies, decapitating them, putting things through their hearts, cremating bodies, like we were saying, in the 17th century, but it just keeps going.
At least they didn't burn anybody alive. Mm-hmm. Not yet, at least.
Not yet. But this epidemic led to 17 articles in 1732 alone in professional journals, followed by 22 learned treaties over the next 3 years.
No gazettes this time?
But by that time, the London press had reported that in Hungary, there were dead bodies sucking the blood of the living, for the latter visibly dry up, while the former are filled with blood. The frenzy continued on in the case of Arnold Peol happened, which is one of the most famous cases. And his name actually wasn't that. That was just a nickname given to him, but I don't even know his real name. I'm so sorry this happened to you, and I'm so sorry that I didn't even have, the time to look up your real name. But Arnold was actually a Serbian who is believed to have become a vampire after his death, initiating an epidemic of supposed vampirism that killed at least 16 people in his village. As a result, his body was exhumed and found to have fresh blood in his mouth. So despite this being the age of enlightenment, the belief in vampires just kept on increasing so much that this mass hysteria actually spread throughout most of Europe now. So something that came from like Poland, Hungary, whatever, and now we're all over, baby, and we're coming in hot. Even government officials engaged in the hunting and staking of vampires. Government officials even examined a body, wrote case reports, and published books throughout Europe on the supposed vampire. The hysteria, which was commonly referred to as the 18th century vampire controversy, continued for a generation. The problem was exacerbated by rural epidemics of so-called vampire attacks, undoubtedly caused by the higher amount of superstition that was present in village communities, with locals digging up bodies and in some cases staking them. The controversy in Austria actually stopped when Empress Maria Theresa sent her personal physician to investigate the claims of vampiric entities, and he concluded that vampires did not exist. So this iconic empress was done away with this whole vampire thing. She passed laws prohibiting the opening of graves and desecration of bodies, and this eventually sparked other European countries to follow suit. Thank you, Miss Maria Theresa, Empress, Queen, not Queen,
Smoke
but
for
Empress.
Maria, baby.
Smoke. But then it was actually kind of interesting because in the 19th century, there was this switch where now we're in a literary transformation. So now, a century ago, we were staking bodies, we were exhuming them, studying them, putting a sickle through their head, whatever it was, around their neck or something. But now we get into the 19th century, and now we have writers writing about vampires, but instead of, writing them as these people that, or whatever, dead bodies that spread disease, now the vampires are charming and aristocratic.
Yeah, why are vampires always rich? I've never heard of a poor vampire.
I know. I mean, who else can sleep all day if you don't have passive income?
Will they work all night?
They don't work, they just feast. Anyway, and have sex. In 1819, John Polidori's The Vampire introduced this new view of a vampire being this, rich guy, charming, whatever. Later on, Bram Stoker wrote the iconic Dracula, which obviously we use, we have the story of Dracula and so many TV shows, movies
which was
today.
Based on Vlad the Impaler.
Well, allegedly, but they haven't really proved that. And his book also gave readers the charismatic, sinister, and alluring Count Dracula. However, there was one of the most famous cases of a vampire that happened in the 19th century, and that was the case of Mercy Brown. And what happened was villagers of Exeter, Rhode Island, knew that farmer George Brown had a problem, which was, the main man of the household. In 1883, his wife, Mary Brown, succumbed to a mysterious illness. 6 months later, his 20-year-old daughter, Mary Olive Brown, also fell ill and died. Within the next several years, his 19-year-old daughter, Mercy Brown, also died of this illness. George's teenage son, Edwin Brown, a healthy man that was working as a store clerk, became suddenly frail and sick, also died. The village doctor informed George, the, man of the dad of the house, whatever, that consumption was taking his family. But the country folk of Exeter had another explanation. On a chilly March afternoon in 1892, a group of men entered Exeter's Chestnut Hill Cemetery. They then began to exhume the bodies of George Brown's wife and 2 daughters. They had concluded that one of the deceased was leaving the grave at night to suck the life out of its own relatives. Only by killing the vampire could young Edwin be saved. I guess Edwin Brown, he didn't die yet. He was just really sick. So they wanted him to be saved, and they thought that, digging up the mom and the 2 sisters, they could find the vampire and eventually save Edwin. First, the men examined the bodies of Mrs. Brown and daughter Mary, finding them to be properly decomposed. Then they exhumed Mercy Brown. Slowly, they shoveled into Mercy's grave. When they reached the corpse, they suddenly stepped back in terror because Mercy, who had been buried for more than 2 months now, appeared oddly well preserved. It seemed her hair and nails had grown, and when the men cautiously prodded the corpse with their shovel, they found that it was filled with fresh blood. The suspected vampire's heart was removed and burned on a nearby rock. The ashes were added to young Edwin's medicine. Gross.
Oh, man.
Still, the boy died less than 2 months later.
Oh, man.
So that whole thing with Mercy Brown was just... okay. Fast forward to 20th and 21st century, modern day. Vampires have become ingrained in our pop culture.
It's like a TLC thing. Like, you see vampires on TLC talking about sucking blood.
Yeah, we obviously, the Twilight series.
Vampire Diaries.
Anne Rice's interview with the vampire. Vampires now seem to
Machine Gun Kelly and Megan Fox.
Oh, God. I don't know if that's just bizarre. That's just weird.
That's just kinky.
Yeah. But not all modern occurrences of vampires were these drama romance movies and books. There were actually allegations of vampire attacks in Malawi during late 2002 and early 2003. The allegations got so bad that mobs stoned one person to death and attacked at least 4 others, including Governor Eric Chiwaya, based on the belief that the government was colluding with vampires.
Oh, man.
This happened again in late 2017 with 6 people accused of being vampires that were killed. And we also know the chupacabra. I did a video on the chupacabra if you want to learn more about it. But basically, chupacabra means goat sucker. And chupacabra was allegedly seen in Puerto Rico and Mexico and is said to be a creature that feeds upon the flesh or drinks the blood of domesticated animals, leading some to consider it kind of a vampire-esque creature, I guess. So now, with all that being said, now we're in the modern era. But what was actually happening to these people that were getting sick? In 1985, biochemist David Dolphin proposed a link between the rare blood disorder porphyria and vampire folklore. Noting that the condition is treated by intravenous heme, he suggested that the consumption of large amounts of blood may result in heme being transported somehow across the stomach wall and into the bloodstream. Thus, vampires were merely sufferers of this blood disorder porphyria, seeking to replace heme and alleviate their symptoms. Juan Gomez Alonso, a neurologist, examined the possible link of rabies with vampire folklore. The susceptibility to garlic and light could be due to hypersensitivity, which is a symptom of rabies. It can also affect portions of the brain that could lead to disturbance of normal sleep patterns, thus becoming nocturnal, and hypersexuality. Legend once said that a man was not rabid if he could look at his own reflection, an allusion to the legend that vampires have no reflection. Wolves and bats, which are often associated with vampires, bat, wing, let's go, can be carriers of rabies. The disease can also lead to a drive to bite others and to a bloody frothing at the mouth, or like the foaming whatever of the mouth and rabies. So that's kind of cool. Crazy, I guess. No?
I would say that's probably the most likely scenario here.
But with all of that being said, do you have any comments about vampires? I mean, I know that there's like whole documentaries and like Dr. Phil, or not Dr. Phil, but have you seen those like My Strange Addiction? It's like vampires. Like there are people that go to these things.
They recreationally drink blood. And I think they get, most of them get the consent of another person, and another person is fine with them drinking their blood. They get tested for, AIDS and such. But are there real vampires lurking in the shadows that are just undead bodies that come up? Probably not. But what do you think? Well, rabies is pretty scary.
Yeah, that is true. But even if it's real, not real, I think it's still interesting to learn about the legends, the stories, how it kind of all revolved around the fact that they didn't have science and technology, which...
So they just fiddled with corpses. Hey, that's kind of fun.
I guess. But anyway, that is it for this week's episode on vampires. We hope you liked it. If you did, as always, leave a like, comment, make sure to subscribe for next week's video on something spooky, something paranormal, Halloween related. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you guys next time here on Cauldron Convos, baby.
Toodaloo.
Bye.